Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast, episode number 5. I am your host, Rick Verbanis, and I am joined by my partner, Bob Lucius. Bob, how you doing today?
Oh, man, Rick, I am so excited for today's episode. I've been looking forward to this all week.
I know, right? We've got a really special guest. Bob Sharen's going to be joining us here in a moment, and we get to talk with him. So that'll be a lot of fun. We've certainly been saying his name a lot in our last few podcasts. Last one, we were going over the Deathlock Lives series with art by Mark Zeck and John Beatty. And, of course, Bob Sharen's the colorist. And then in episode 3, we talked about the Bloodstone Hunt with Kieran Dwyer. And, of course, Bob Sharen was the colorist there. So, yeah, we've been saying his name a lot. So it's going to be fun to finally talk with him.
Yeah, well, let's hit it.
Well, before we do, I just wanted to point out we had another listener leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. This one comes from, I'm going to say Isleman. It's I-L-E space man. I don't know if it's Isleman, Illman. Let's go with Isleman. So his is titled From a Cap Fan, and it's 5 stars. And he wrote, ran across these 2 podcasts about Captain America. You can tell the knowledgeable passion and excitement these guys have for the subject. Great to hear from the grandson of the creator in the second of the series. So I guess he was referring after listening to episode 2 where we interviewed Jesse Simon, grandson of Joe Simon. So thanks, Isleman. We appreciate your review. And if you want to leave us a 5-star review on Apple or iTunes and get listed here, on the next podcast, we'll randomly pick someone. So please do leave those reviews. We really do appreciate it. Okay, now it's time to bring in our guest. Bob, I'm pretty excited about talking with our next guest, Bob Sharen. If that name's familiar, it's because you've read a comic book in 80s and 90s, because his name was in it as a long-time legendary colorist for Marvel Comics. Bob Sharen has colored over 1,500 different comics, and that is over 33,000 different pages. And I'm going to put that in perspective for you, Bob. Okay. Legendary artist Jack Kirby. Guess how many pages he did?
Who knows? I don't know. 10, 15, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
15,000?
19,000.
Wow. Okay.
19,000. And Bob Sharen has done 33,000 pages.
Holy cow.
I know. So we're in the midst of greatness here when it comes to Marvel Comics. And I'm excited to introduce our next guest, Bob Sharen. Bob, how are you?
Good.
Welcome to the show. We're very excited to have you. So were you strictly Marvel all during that time, or did you color with any other publishers?
At the very end of my illustrious career, I did some work for Tom DeFalco on Image.
Gotcha. And I like what you did there with illustrious career. No pun intended. So
wait, am I getting paid for this?
Check's in the mail, Bob.
Okay.
So those who aren't familiar with how comics were actually hand colored back then, because you started in the late 70s. Did so many issues, like I mentioned, in the 80s and 90s. So back then they were hand colored. And if you could maybe take us through the process from when you received the pages to when they were published, tell the listeners, how did that work?
Well, we colored with Dr. Martin's watercolors. And initially we colored on stat paper, photostat paper, which was basically photographic paper. And it was really a pain because it didn't absorb the color very well. What we had to do was have a little stack of blotters next to the table. And when we tried to get the color to adhere to the paper, there was too much ink because it didn't absorb it. So we had to blot it. And it was really a pain. But not too many years later, I forget exactly when, they switched over to Xeroxing. So we got books on basically regular Xerox paper. The paper was better sometimes than others, but when the paper was good, it was a lot easier to use and color on. Plus, Marvel gave us a lot of free supplies.
I guess that's one of the fringe benefits. So, like, how often did you make a mistake? You know, because with that many pages that you're doing, right? I mean, if you make a mistake, how often does that happen where you had to start over from scratch, or what did happen?
Well, I don't remember ever making any serious mistakes, but they're fixable with bleach. You could just bleach out the Dr. Martens and let the bleach dry and start over.
So for the original art collectors out there, and I'm starting to get into that over the last couple of years, I noticed that most of the original art is black and white, but there's other. I've seen other types of art out there that's colored.
Yeah, I think one of the terms we often hear thrown around are color guides, and I think for the benefit of a lot of listeners, can you kind of explain to us what those color guides are and what they're used for?
Sure. First of all, we had a limited palette back in the day of 64 colors. To make things easier for the color separators so they wouldn't screw things up, which they managed to do anyway, we would write the color codes on the actual color guide, percentages of red, yellow, and blue, so they would actually know which area was which percentages of color.
That sounds highly precise.
The limited palette was interesting because you had to make choices based on what you could use rather than what you might want to use. Later on, and I don't remember, I'm trying to remember when, because we had a color chart from the separators showing what each color looked like in print that we just stuck up in front of our drawing boards. The original one was 64 colors. I believe they went to double that. Not exactly sure how many colors it was. Maybe it was a double, but we got to do more eventually. And so we just had to write in different percentages. And so we had a bigger palette, which was good.
You colored 70 issues of Captain America back in the 1980s. So I believe your first Cap issue was in 1979. It was number 231. And then you did 238. And then you came back with issue 246 and then proceeded to color 45 of the next 55 issues. It's quite a run. You left after issue 301, and then you came back for a few issues in the 330s. And then starting with 340, you worked on the next 22 of the next 26 issues, not to mention a few Cap annuals too. So you worked with some amazing art teams for Captain America, like John Byrne and Joe Rubinstein, Mike Zeck and John Beatty, Kieran Dwyer. So maybe we could go through a couple of those art teams that you worked with, right? And I know we're asking a lot here because you did so many, and it was a long time ago. So I'm just curious, what stands out about your time with John Byrne and Joe Rubinstein?
Well, first of all, the workflow was determined by the editor at the time, which was for those issues that you mentioned. The first ones were Roger Stern, and the rest of the most were Jim Salkrup or Ralph Macchio. And if the editors were, how can I put this? If they were doing their jobs right, everything ran well and everything was in succession, because you have to remember the colorist is the last guy in line in the process. So if anybody is late on their deadlines before the colorist gets squeezed for time, which is not comfortable. But Salkrup and Ralph were pretty good editors, which is why I colored a whole bunch of runs for them without too much problem. But in terms of the guys doing the actual art, with the John Byrne run, you can't get a better inker than Joe Rubinstein. their styles really, really matched well. Same with Zek and Beatty, and Kieran Dwyer and Al Milgram too. They seem to click. So those were all really, really good books to work on.
Were there any characters in particular that in these sorts of runs that you found particularly challenging to work with?
No, we always got good color reference along with the books if we needed it, and so our job really, since we knew the color schemes of the characters, was just to make them look good with the right backgrounds and the right lighting too. A lot of times the artists, especially Byrne and Zek, they really indicated good light sources in the black and white art. If they didn't, it was our job as the colorist to indicate those light sources and make it more interesting. That was always a challenge. We basically took the art that already had a certain mood established, but we had to accentuate that mood. That was fun.
Bob, I've noticed that pencilers and inkers get credit for their work on covers, but rarely colorists. Why? I mean, why is that?
Well, first of all, we rarely got covers along with the pages of the interiors because the editors love to keep messing with the way the covers looked because they're conscious of the fact that that was the first thing that the fans saw. And so they would have somebody color up a cover in the office and look at it and say, well, let's do this instead, blah, 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 blah. And they could never do that because we all work with FedEx. So by the time pages got sent back and forth with changes, it was insane. So 99% of the covers got colored that way in the office. And that's why people usually didn't get credit, because it was some knucklehead in the bullpen who finally did the version that the editor liked. And so they didn't get any credit. And I probably did, I would say, under 5 covers that I can remember having sent to me with the rest of the book. And I couldn't tell you what books those were. It was so rare to get a cover that was actually more fun, but it didn't happen very often.
That's fascinating.
Having colored over 1,500 Marvel comics, there are several iconic issues that you were part of. You did a lot of Spider-Man, right? So you did, I want to say, according to what I've read, like 167 Amazing Spider-Man, 97 Spectacular Spider-Man, 64 Web of Spider-Man, and others as well. And so among these, you did Amazing Spider-Man 245, which was the famous Hobgoblin issue, Amazing Spider-Man 300, production of Venom, Spider-Man #1, the Todd McFarlane, and then you did a lot of other amazing issues. So you did a few John Byrne X-Men Dark Phoenix issues back in, I think, 1980. You did some Frank Miller Daredevil. You did the first Scott Lang as Ant-Man in Marvel Premiere #47. Are there any that really stand out that you take pride in, that you were involved in these historic, monumental issues?
To tell you the truth, each job was pretty much the same. I'm not a real. I'll tell you why. I took pride in my work. I was always a perfectionist. I always tried to get things as perfect as possible. Just one thing the editors liked about me. Number one, I never missed a deadline, ever. That's really important when you work in comics, especially if you're the colorist who's the last guy in line, because if I miss the deadline, the book misses shipping. So that's a big no-no.
Right.
And colorists who miss their deadlines didn't last long. And the editors really appreciated the fact that I took a lot of pride in my work. It was, if you have ever seen different color guides by different people, a lot of them are rushed and they're a little sloppy. I really tried to make mine, even though it didn't matter that much because they were all just indicators to the separators. I always tried to make mine look as much as the printed book would look as I possibly could. I was just a real stickler for that. Mm-hmm. So consequently, the reason I colored all those books was I was good and I was dependable, which is, slapping myself on the back maybe. But if you do those two things, then the editors like you and they give you work.
That is so true. I want to say, 15, 20 years ago, I interviewed artist Mark Bagley, and I asked him how he got so much work. And he said that in this industry, that you need to have two of the following three qualities if you're going to get consistent work. You need to have talent, be good at what you do. You need to be dependable, make your deadlines. So those two things you said. And the third thing is you need to be a nice guy. You need to be somebody that's easy to work with. The editors, can give advice and you follow it. And he said, you don't have to have all three, but you need to have two. So you can be a talented person that makes their deadlines, but the biggest jerk in the world, and you'll probably still get work. Or you can be a really nice guy that makes all his deadlines, but maybe not the top talent, but you're going to get work, and so on. So and I asked him, it's funny, I asked him, so which two do you have? He goes, oh, of course, I have all three. So, but anyway, so yeah, and I've talked with other creators over the years, and they've all agreed with that story. And it sounds like, Bob, that at the very least you have two of those three. And I like to think you're a pretty nice guy, at least for my interaction with you in the Captain America comic book Facebook page. So you have that go for you too.
Yeah.
Well, it's really a good idea in comics to try to get along with your editors. I mean, it's nice if you get along with the other guys who work on the book, but, that's not really necessary. The editors are the important guys.
All right. I have to ask you a question. Speaking of the Captain America comic book fans Facebook group, right? You're pretty active in that group. And one thing that I seem to see from you, whenever we post any of the Captain America work done by Rob Liefeld, you seem to have a pretty strong opinion on him.
I have pretty strong opinions on him in terms of an artist because I never met him. He's probably a nice guy. And McFarlane's the other guy.
So tell us why you have such strong opinions, at least on Rob Liefeld, because when we post, the Heroes, was it Heroes Reborn?
Heroes Reborn.
Yes, that's quite the controversial posts whenever that comes up on a monthly basis, because we do those daily flashbacks.
For a lot of folks,
we get quite the amount of pros and cons, and so tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Well, both of those guys sort of learned to draw on the fly. I can't believe that they got popular not knowing how to draw. Like when I colored the McFarlane Spider-Man #1, I just slapped my forehead when I looked at some of that art. Like, I'm thinking to myself, does the guy know that there's a skull inside a human head? Is that why? It just baffled me. But it was popular.
That must have made it a bit challenging to color then. If the anatomy isn't quite what you expect.
No, it's all the same. You make a head flesh colored, whether it's drawn right or not. But the other thing that bothered me was the panel structure. It was a little wacky, and I don't think it really helped the story much. But the guy got famous on it, so what the heck.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever actually colored a Liefeld job, not that I remember anyway.
So which comics, because you do a lot of shows, right? You back when we had shows, you would do some cons. What comics do you see most at the shows when people bring something to you to get signed?
Well, the ones you would expect, like Spider-Man 300, the McFarlane, 1, 2, 3, 4, Spider-Man runs. Anything that I worked on that was a real hot book is usually what guys bring up to get signed.
So speaking of shows, I have to talk about my Mike Zeck, John Beatty, Captain America commission that you hand colored for me. So in 2019, I went to the Baltimore Comic-Con and rushed to get on Zeck's list so that he could do a Captain America. And he drew this really nice homage kind of bust to Captain America's 275, that cover, where he's kind of looking up at and he's got his mouth open and he's angry, and it's a really nice sketch. And then of course John Beatty, as you mentioned, being his longtime inker, just finally settling into that duo was just amazing. I had John photocopy the sketch by Zeck so that I could have the pencils and the inked version next to each other. I had the opportunity to work with you, where I gave you a high-res copy of the inked original, and you hand-colored it for me. And now I have all three of them framed together, and it's an amazing. It's one of the things that people remark the most when I show them my original art, my sketches. They see the transformation that these three masters of their work do. So can you take us through that process of hand coloring that you do for commissions?
First of all, that job was a lot of fun, just to see the pencils and the inks right next to each other. And after I colored it, of course, I got to see all three together, which was really great. That's the only job that I've been offered where the three stages of the process were all gathered together in one place, which is really nice.
Yeah.
But in terms of hand coloring fan art, I just approach it like I used to in the old day, which was just sit down and have fun with it. Because of the job that I did for you, I got more interested in trying to give fans the alternative of either coloring on the original, which a lot of people don't want. They want the original black and white art pristine. So I just get a nice high-res scan, printed on really good Bristol paper, and hand color that. So they've got the black and white and the colored version to hang side by side.
And it does make for a really amazing display, right? Because I'm looking at it right now, and I have it stacked vertically. I mean, you could do it horizontally, but it just looked really good vertically because I thought your eyes flow, right? Your eyes kind of flow through the process a little bit more. And if you really think about it, of these three images that are framed, two of them are originals, right? So the pencils is just a copy, right? Because John Beatty inked Mike's originals. So the penciled inked version is in the middle, and then your version, which is hand colored, is also an original, really, if you think about it. So it just adds to the whole experience. And I'll add this to you. I don't think I ever told you this, Bob, but I'm also a member of the Mike Zeck Facebook page, which Mike obviously sees and is a part of. And when I got this, I posted it, and Mike's comments were, when he saw your colors, his comments were the cherry on top. And I thought that was a nice salute to your work.
I'm in that group too, and I think I actually remember seeing that.
Yep. So how can fans get in touch with you if they want to have their original art or their high-res copy hand-colored by the master, Bob Sharen?
Well, right now it's just Facebook. I don't have a website right now. Yeah, Facebook is the thing right now. I have an album of all the stuff that I've hand colored on my Facebook page. People can check that out and just message me.
Excellent. And also, too, if they want to just chat with you about comics, especially Captain America comics, they can come to our Facebook group, which is Captain America Comic Book Fans, and chat with you that way as well. So, Bob, this was great. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us and take us through the process and share some memories too. It was a lot of fun, and we hope to chat with you more in the Facebook group. Okay, well, that was a lot of fun. We appreciated Bob coming on and speaking with us. So for the next episode, we are going to be getting into a sometimes controversial storyline. And for those out there, the old guys that love Cap, Steve Englehart is certainly one of the, I guess, beloved writers that came. He was the first one really to do a long run after Stan Lee, and I say old guys because I'm an old guy. You're an old guy, right? So we go back and we have some fond memories of stuff from our childhood. And so when Steve Englehart joined the Captain America series, he started with a bang. His first 4 issues were going into visioning the 1950s Captain America meeting the current Captain America. And so we're going to be exploring Captain America issues 153 through 156.
Yeah, it's a great story, Rick. And I mean, a lot of folks had been concerned about the paradox of the 1950s Cap, considering how they retcon Cap in Avengers 4, which we discussed in our second podcast. But this has been a controversial storyline from the time that it was introduced and continues to be much talked about. So it's going to be a great show.
Yeah. Yep. And I know, as you mentioned, a lot of our Facebook group members, we have 2,400 of them out there, right? And whenever we talk about this storyline, it certainly gets a lot of response. So we'd like to actually hear from you. So if you want to leave a message, a voice message, I'm trying to keep it 60 seconds or less, you can go onto our Anchor page, which you can find in our show notes, and go on there and record a message and tell us, what you'd like us to talk about or give your thoughts, or maybe even ask a question about these Captain America 153 through 156. So that'll be fun to listen, hear from some of our listeners as well. All right, so that wraps us up, and thanks everybody. And as always, Bob, it's been fun wrapping Cap with you.
Absolutely. Take care.